Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. Brought to you by 𝗃𝗏Radiocenter.com, a Motorola value-added reseller. The Church Safety Guys is a nonprofit organization dedicated to equipping the vigilant, those men and women who stand watch, keeping our houses of worship and places of faith safe. We believe church safety and security must be a ministry first, and have engaged servant leaders who continually strive for excellence and teams of motivated volunteers that are always training. Join us for the next hour as the Church Safety Guys unpack safety, security, leadership, and ministry operations with your hosts, Dr. 𝗧𝗵𝗂𝗿𝗵𝗂 and Mike Scully. This broadcast is also available on YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Feel free to like, subscribe, and share with your ministry.
Well, hello. Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. I am James, and once again on this broadcast, joined by my co-host, Mike.
Howdy. First, I'm like sitting there waiting. I'm waiting. You delayed that sentence out.
I was
like,
trying to throw you off of your game because it's been a couple of weeks.
It has been a couple of weeks, and I'm like, wait a minute, you're going so slowly there. I'm like, wait, I thought my connection slowed down for a second.
No, it's all good. So thanks for hanging out with us. If you joined us and this is your first time, or maybe you haven't been with a live broadcast and with us in a live broadcast in a long time, welcome. As always, we would really appreciate it if you click the like and subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube or one of the other platforms. That helps us out with the Google algorithms. And then, as always, you can reach out to us through our website, which is churchsafetyguys.com, or you can reach out to us through the Church Security app if you have a question, or if there's something that we can help you navigate with your church safety team or with your church culture, church ministry. We would love to do that, and love to help you as much as we can. And we wanted to talk about a couple of things, obviously, on this broadcast. And as always, you can listen to the latest broadcast on the Church Security app. You can hear it on our website, and then also our YouTube channel if you want to go back. And I think this is the, if I remember correctly, this is the 193rd episode. So we're creeping up on the we're creeping up on 200. We should do something special this season for 200.
Yeah, it kind of blows my mind that's how far we've come. And you know what? I know it's like we just had a few weeks off, and it's always good to have a little bit of a break here and there. But we keep coming back because we know each of y'all out there that listen to this on a regular basis. Thank you for doing so. Do appreciate it, and it does help churches all over the country, and really we've heard from folks all over the world that this is helping them. So we do it for you. It's kind of a labor of love, sacrifice from our families on a Sunday night to put these recordings together and go live on a regular basis. So again, that like and subscribe is how it helps us get and reach more people. So thanks for doing so.
Absolutely. And if there's a particular topic that maybe you haven't heard us talk about, or you'd like us to talk about, please feel free to reach out to us, email us, and we're happy to put that in the rotation. Or if we can't, a lot of times what happens is we'll go out into the church safety world, or really even the evangelical world, and we'll kind of scout out different people on different topics, pastors, leaders, that sort of thing, and experts, and we'll bring them in and have a conversation with them. So if it's not something that we feel comfortable with with the topic. A lot of times we research it, and then we'll bring a guest in, or we'll have that conversation with a guest. And again, all of it is, like Mike said, all of it is just to help you folks, because we've had so many folks reach out to us and just say, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing. It's helped me in my church. And our focus is just to be a blessing to churches as much as possible. So,
and honestly, you know what, James, one other thought that kind of came to me is really, as we talk on the eve of the great apocalypse, eclipse.
Yeah, you said that intentionally because you know where I'm going.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, it's important to kind of bring that up, but I think it's also saying is that I posted today, or I think it was yesterday, really about, there's so much talk about darkness because of the eclipse and everything else. And I feel like the focus is getting a whole lot of attention, and it's a lot of folks that are, you know what, hey, God did amazing things when he created the heavens and the earth and the sun and the moon and the stars. So, you know what, that's nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. Tomorrow is a witness of more of God's creation. And I think that's the focus of what it should be. And so I think, but what we're seeing is across the board is the folks that have the wrong motivation. And I think not just about the eclipse, and we'll talk about that, but in other ways, I feel like in church safety and security is really that nature of, we do this, we keep coming on because we're trying to have an impact and make sure that the God's word and the important focus of ministry first rises above the noise and the really the noise of the folks that are just out there slinging training. Okay, now training's important, don't get me wrong, of course. We're always going to say semper disciplina, always training. The difference is, we're here trying to help all churches, regardless of their life cycle, their maturity, etc. And some are just out there trying to make a buck. Now, I don't fault people who are trying to run a business. That makes sense. I think we got to watch their motivations and watch how they kind of put themselves out there and contort, and really just marketing layer and slickness, and trying to take advantage of churches who may have fear as a motivator. And so they prey on that. And unfortunately, we see folks kind of spending money with perhaps the wrong vendors. And it's unfortunate because their motivation isn't necessarily pure. It isn't the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, I did a video, a quick 5-minute video earlier today, and posted it, I think, in all the groups. And if you haven't had a chance to watch that, you're welcome to go back and watch that. But the truth is that, there's two aspects of this. There's fear and there's anxiety, right? And so fear is mentioned, and this is one of the things that I point out in the video. Fear is mentioned in the Bible. I think it's like 365 times. Several people have said that, and, compared that to, okay, once every day of the year, we live in fear. There's nothing, and that's part of who we are as individuals created in God's image. We don't know what God knows. So even if you go back to Genesis, you have that aspect of not knowing what we don't know, right? And so that creates that fear of the unknown. The anxiety piece of it, anxiety is connected closely to that, because we start worrying. Like we start looking at, okay, what can I control? What can I not control? I can't control this. So instead of planning and then being, letting it go, saying, okay, I've done the best I can. We're ready. Let's go. If something happens, I'm ready to go. What goes in that next level is anxiety, and anxiety builds. And then, that's that balance, almost like the scales of justice, right? That when we start planning too much and we can't get out of our own head, then that scale starts shifting, and all of a sudden we're we're anxious and we're like, okay, do I really need, should I, and it pours and trickles down into everything. Like, maybe I should have gone out and practiced with the firearm more. Maybe I should be carrying a different firearm. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do that, instead of bringing it back in and saying, okay, no, I've practiced. I'm going to do the best I can if this comes my way. And, we've certainly seen, and we see the honestly, multiple times, the Apostle Paul in the New Testament talks about how, we aren't called, as believers, we aren't called to be fearful. The Apostle Paul never gets irritated with someone for being fearful, but he says, look, don't stay there. Like, we're not called to be fearful. We're called to understand and realize that we have the Holy Spirit, that we have the guidance of God and protection and wisdom. And, what really sometimes ramps me up with this topic is that you're absolutely right. We see all the time folks reach out to us and they'll send us a video clip, or they'll send us a link to a new trainer or something like that. And they're like, hey, how does this look? Does this look valuable? Is it worth the time? Is it worth our investment? Is it worth our money? And oftentimes, because you start to see trends and you start to see the same thing over and over again, demonstrated by different individuals, and the church safety and security realm is not that large in North America, then you start thinking, oh my goodness, like what are we doing here? Like, we're trying to train churches, we're trying to talk to churches, but at the same time, we're sending out videos and we're passing along information that may or may not be true. And if you dive into it and really dig into what's being said, 9 times out of 10, there's stuff in it that's not true, or it's just it's a used car sales tactic. And, I'm not here to say names. We're not going to say names, but the truth is that, repeatedly we've seen folks pop up here and there where, an individual, and I'll just be as generic as possible. There's a lot of videos circulating by this one individual that has just recently come into the church safety realm. Great production, attention grabbing, does a lot of things, smoke and mirrors, to try and get people's views, to try and be the next YouTube sensation. And it's under the guise of trying to help churches. But the truth is, being biblically focused and ministry minded, encouraging someone to be fearful is not helping a church. That's not benefiting anyone whatsoever. And, this particular individual, starts off the production like, hey, we just had this breaking news alert from, the FBI. And then when you listen to him for about 30 seconds, he goes into, I can't tell you what the FBI said, but it's a breaking news alert. And the FBI is doing this and FBI is doing that. And if you look at, and you dive into this stuff and you really dig, what you start to see is this is old news, where the FBI released a statement back in March saying, hey, be on the lookout, be aware, we're coming into Easter. Now we're past Easter, and this individual grabs it, slaps a special, production label on it, sticks it on YouTube, and now all of a sudden everybody's in a panic. Oh, he said the FBI did an alert. Well, you can Google an FBI house of worship alert and get your information from the FBI's website. I can tell you that I tend, honestly, and I'm not saying this because it's us or it's me, but we have a very close knit ministry with the church safety guys. I mean, when I say close knit, I mean, I'm talking to Mike almost daily. He's talking to me. We're talking to law enforcement all over the country. We're talking to experts all over the country in various things. And, part of my part of my Monday through Friday job is working for the Defense Department, in which case I literally my desk is like right next to a federal emergency management agent who like repeatedly, like anytime something comes down, he's like, he literally rolls his chair back and he's like, "Hey, James, I know you do a lot of work with churches. Have you seen this? Or can you talk about this? Or, maybe you should pass this along, or what's going on?" So, it just, I don't want to beat a dead horse. I do want to jump into our topic and move forward. But the truth is that we really, it's been said, folks talk about, and actually the apostle, I think it was the apostle Paul that said, in the end times, there'll be false teachers and false prophets. And, that applies to every aspect of Christianity. It's not just preaching and teaching. Okay. Teaching could be connected to church safety training, because that is teaching in a sense. But if you get frustrated because you listen to various evangelical preachers who have like a prosperity gospel type thing, like pay us and, God will bless you type thing, there are just as many individuals in the church safety and security realm trying to do that, and that throw up those smoke and mirrors as in church world. So the only reason, the only reason I say all of that and we bring that up is because we see more and more of it. And honestly, we're going to continue to see more and more of it regardless. I know, because people look at it as, oh, I can, slap a couple labels on this and change my title of my PowerPoint slide and start training folks and make an extra buck because, this is church safety. This hasn't changed since we started in 2018. And there are times where we've had, and I'm just going to be honest and transparent with our listeners, but there have been times when we've had folks make comments about us and come after us like, well, ministry first really isn't a priority. We need to train with guns. And it's like, what? We're not even like, literally, we're not doing anything, but people come after us because we don't work full time. We do this as a labor of love on the side, trying to help churches. And we're not looking at it like a business.
Right.
And that puts a flag on us for others, because the folks that are looking at it like a business come after us and try and discredit or do whatever.
They are operating in a spirit of fear, because they believe that by us talking about ministry first and having the right mindset and warning folks of these soothsayers and snake oil salesmen and so forth, of these training situations, that we're creating a market that is more aware, and they can't peddle those wares as easily when you have an aware public. And I think that's a big difference. I mean, you see that today. We talked earlier, you said about planning. You get into those folks that just get into analysis paralysis, and you get into the woulda, coulda, shouldas, and the second guessing, and the fear and the anxiety piece. And really, though, you start to get bought into the fear, and therefore now the fear is a big motivator. Psychology wise, it's a huge way to drive dollars. And so they use that fear to kind of, again, play on or prey on, if you will, and not pray as in pray to God, but pray as an attack, and really take advantage. So, I mean, I think it's in Acts, talking really about folks who are kind of wolves, fierce wolves, and among yourselves, and twisted things. So, I mean, they're going to distort and twist and kind of take things in a different direction. I think it's unfortunate that folks like that feel this need to be kind of bomb throwers and throw it out there and hey, look, I got extra views on YouTube because I lied to people. Well, like, what good does that do in the end of the day? It doesn't. Well, it just getting eyeballs.
That's what's crazy, because people will sit there and they'll say, well, it wasn't really a lie. But distorting the truth
put anything out since January. specifically. I mean, that was more warning. I mean, it was general. It's just in general. But I mean,
Yeah.
I think this gets into a whole other topic we could spend an episode on just by itself.
Maybe
which
we
is
should.
really well. Maybe we should. I mean, but I really feel like there's an internal threat, and by internal, I don't mean internal to your church building. I mean internal to the church. That is a bigger threat.
It's true. There is, and the honest. I mean, if you look at the shift in our culture, in our country, in our climate, and different things like that. I mean, we do need to be careful because we can very easily, as a Christian, a Christian country, if you will, a Christian community, the church environment can very easily become a target for, labels like gun-toting, conservative, whatever, that your mute is still on. But
yeah, I'm trying to silence the distractions in the background.
No, you're good. So. But yeah, so the I don't know. I mean, we could go on and on about it, but I guess my point with it is just please be careful. Please do your due diligence. I would say that to anyone. I'm not saying that to say, hey, you've got to 100% get your information from the Church Safety Guys ministry or us. But I'll tell you that, honestly, I mean, we do the best that we can. And we have the ministry experience and whatnot. And, just be careful. That's all I'm saying. Like, I see so many people that reach out to us and they're like, hey, what do you think about this individual, or what do you think about this trainer or whatever? And I'm not out to grind an axe in somebody else's training business or training company. There are a lot of great trainers out there, but again, when you've been doing this as long as we have, you start seeing trends of people that really don't care about being kingdom focused. They really care about making money. And we've said that all along. But just keep that in your mind, that climate, that situation has not changed. So that all being said, I want to jump in real quick to talk about the conference this year coming up. So 2 weeks. I'm like, what in the world?
I need another month.
But we still have tickets available. So you can visit churchsafetyconference.com. That's going to be at Grace Covenant Church the end of April in Austin, Texas. And we're filling up pretty quick. I mean, the VIP has actually sold out, and we've got some great speakers. We've added a couple of extra days, a couple extra components. So if you have the opportunity to come down and hang out with us, you're certainly welcome. I'm looking forward to it. That particular Sunday, I think it's the 27th. We won't be doing a live broadcast because we'll be traveling and trying to clean up, sleeping from that. But check out our website. There's other conferences. There's other training coming up that we've got listed in Ohio. I am actually in 2 weeks, right before I fly down to Austin for the Church Security Essentials Conference. I am actually speaking with the Ohio Crime Prevention Association with their annual conference in Dublin, Ohio. So if you haven't checked them out, you're welcome to check out their website. If you happen to be law enforcement, that is a law enforcement based conference every year in Ohio. And there's some great content with that there. This year, they actually asked me to come speak, and I will be talking about house of worship and basically interaction with law enforcement and what we can do to just work together better and support our communities. So I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a good a good thing. But if you get the opportunity, check out the 𝗏𝐻SafetyConference.com. That's got all of the conference information and tickets on there. And there are still some of those available. And I'm sure that if you get the chance to come, you'll be blessed. You'll have a great opportunity to hear some fantastic biblically based folks that, focus on striving to support churches the way we do. And it'll be a good time. I'm looking forward to it. So let's jump into the topic at hand. So when seconds count, dialing 911, it's kind of the title of this episode, and it'll be a shorter one. Obviously, we've covered a couple of things on this broadcast, but we usually, going back through, I realized the other day that we haven't talked about this in a while, and this is something that we usually try and circle back around and talk about every 2 years or so. And so it's a good topic to talk about. So
it might seem like cavalier and say dialing 911, duh. I mean, that's what people might sit there and think of the title, but we really wanted to break it down and kind of let people think about it from a standpoint that how many times, now maybe for yourselves, think about your family. How many times have your family ever dialed 911 in their entire lifetime? 911 and dialing 911 is not usually very common for folks to even do. So it's not like it's something you build up muscle memory and, oh, I've done this a few times, or I've been exposed to this, or hopefully you've not had to be in that situation with a loved one or another situation that's fallen on your family or your church. But when we're in this situation, obviously as protectors, as people that are volunteering to step forward and stand in the gap and protect the flock, well, we're basically saying, hey, in all likelihood, we're either going to have to take on that responsibility ourselves or be prepared to confidently delegate that in such a way to get somebody who also may never have dialed 911 in their life and help them get through it, because you may have hands-on or another focus in that moment. So it really is not as simple as the headline makes it sound.
No, and it's interesting. You mentioned that how often, when we were talking earlier, how often does someone really dial 911? And we really don't a lot. Like, we talk about it, but the truth is understanding and trying to navigate what is important, what isn't, especially if you live in a larger metropolitan area or city area where both of us are, we live on the outskirts of a metropolitan area. So realistically, if either one of us picked up the phone and dialed 911, you might get elevator music, you might get, you might get a pause, you might get to wait. And so when they process your call and an individual comes on, a dispatcher will come on and say, 911, what's your emergency? You have that moment where, and I can't tell you how many times that I've called where my brain like locks at that moment. Like, they're like, hey, what's your emergency? And you knew exactly what you were going to say the entire time. And then your brain freezes and you're like, I need a police officer to respond to blah, blah, blah. So oftentimes kind of rehearsing and practicing, especially knowing the normal information like your address, your church's address, those type of things, those are good to drill and practice on, because I've literally, 18 years as the safety director of my church in Columbus. And there were times where I called 911 to get an ambulance and I couldn't remember the street address of the church. Like because I'm focused on trying to help the person. Instantly it's a mental block. I literally said to 911, which they probably loved, I'm like, hang on just a second. And I turned around to one of the deacons that was standing there and I said, what's our building address? And he's like, he looked at me and he's like, 4701, Winchester Pike. And I'm like, thank you. 4701 Winchester Pike. I need an ambulance. This is what's going on. So realistically though, and I joke around about that, but you should probably have a short period of time where you have a moment to kind of think through and put things in a priority and say, okay, this is what I need. And if you have more skills, if you have more training, remember that they get calls all the time and they're trying to send help while they're trying to weed through the information that's coming in to determine what help you need. Right. So when you get a hold of someone, probably one of the most important things I could say about it is make sure that you present just the facts of what you need and what is legitimately happening. Don't call them if there was a car accident in front of your in front of your church or something like that. Don't call them and say, well, I think someone's hurt, or I don't know if someone's hurt, or, well, yeah, they could be hurt. Well, they could be. Are they, or are they not? If you don't know, then just be black and white and say, I don't know if we have people hurt, please send an ambulance. And so that kind of helps them cut through what needs to be cut through. But honestly, yeah, I'll tell you, being on both sides of that, that spectrum, the first job I ever had in public safety was as a ambulance dispatcher. And so we would have folks call us through the 911 system and they would go on and on and on and on. And I'm like, okay, you need an ambulance for what? What's going on? I don't care about the backstory of, the roof having a leak and somebody up on the roof repairing it. Just tell me what happened. Okay, he fell off a roof, distance greater than his height. Thank you. That's important. Is he, and then we go to the next thing, is he breathing? Does he have a pulse? Can you see his chest rise? So honestly, it takes me back. It's so funny. It takes me back to the days of watching Dragnet back in the day of, Officer Cannon and Joe Friday, where, they're trying to write down the information and Friday says, just the facts, ma'am. And you're like sitting there, like watching it and you're like, oh my goodness, stop talking. Like, what happened? Stop talking and really say something.
James is younger than me, and yet he drops the Dragnet reference.
Well, figure. I had to at some point.
No, I mean, I think it's important when you look at it, you said it really well, I think, in the sense that the nature of the emergency is the key. Sometimes they'll even say that as a dispatcher, what's the nature of your emergency? Oftentimes they train them to ask that. But what you want to do is you want to let them know what you need, where you need it, and the severity of how important that is. Because just the nature of dialing 911 doesn't mean it's absolutely guaranteed to be an emergency. Absolutely. We've heard the stories of people dialing 911 because they got the wrong order at the drive-thru. So, you got to let them know that this is a serious call, the severity of it, but let them know what. So as their dispatchers are keying in to their system that, hey, I need fire, I need police, I need EMS, and this is where I need it, they can start getting that on the way, essentially, right from that moment. So having those details pre-rehearsed in your mind, going through it kind of, just like we would on our own radio. Think of it, if in a church, we're going to key up on our radio, pause, think for a second, what are you going to say on the radio, instead of keying up, pausing, then thinking. So think before you key up. No difference than 911. Think before you dial 911. And so those details, you want to be ready to kind of describe all that. But focus on the what you need and where you need it first, then the extra details. Now, if this is a threat, if there's something, now you got details of, was it a woman? Was it a male? How tall were they? What were they wearing? Where were they last seen? What was the direction of travel? All the different things. Now you can give them extra detail that it's still pertinent, but helps them potentially respond to the situation at hand.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And if there's a situation where the person is leaving, like if they left the property, the church property, and you're still on the phone with the police or 911 and you need assistance, like if it's somebody you're trying to trespass or somebody that broke in or did something and they're leaving the property, having that description at that point is the best thing that you can offer, because you can't chase somebody down off your property, but they can. So if they go after someone and have that description, they can't go up to somebody and just stop them randomly and say, because you said, oh, I think it's that guy right there. But if you tell them, hey, this guy took something, burglary, for example, this guy stole this, he's got blue jeans on, a red t-shirt, a white ball cap, that gives them reasonable suspicion. And so then as they go track somebody down, they can say, hey, wait a second, I have something where, I have an individual, a witness that's telling me that this person did this. So I have the suspicion, reasonable suspicion at that point to stop people. But it is, it's interesting to me that oftentimes it's hard, and it can be hard to kind of distinguish what's an emergency versus what isn't an emergency. And I know sometimes that kind of leads to folks not calling soon enough. We see that, like not getting emergency services started, and then also those that abuse it. And my family, it's pretty funny. My family won't watch any public safety TV shows with me. They just don't do it because they're like, we know, if it's
That's
ER,
fake.
yeah, ER to The Rookie to any show, that's out there. Because now sometimes if they're really into it, they'll say, hey, Dad, could that really happen? And I'll say, no, probably not like that exactly. They take some liberties. But the truth, one of probably the truest things is when you see a station, if you're lucky enough to live in an area where there are full-time public safety folks, okay, and you're not in a rural area where there's volunteers, that's an entirely different gamut of aspect here. But if you're lucky enough to have folks that are full-time, one of the consistent things is it's going to take them, probably the national average is 8 minutes, but it is going to take them 3 to 4 minutes to actually get to their vehicles, get their equipment on, get in the vehicles, and start out of that station. And so that time might seem like an eternity, but if you are dealing with an emergency situation, you need to get them started as soon as possible.
Right.
And also, one of the folks listening actually mentioned cell phone towers too. Yeah, absolutely. And depending where you are, I know in central Ohio, if you are on your cell phone and you call 911, it goes into one location and then they say, okay, what borough are you in? What area? Because there are different departments and different dispatchers that handle different parts of central Ohio. It's not all, it's not all Columbus. And so then they have to transfer that call to the appropriate resource and appropriate dispatcher. So that can take some time either. So, I mean, I know that gets frustrating sometimes because you're like, I've called 911 before for my own family and said, I need an ambulance, and gotten the elevator music where I've been put on hold waiting for that ambulance. And at that point, I'm like, I'm not in a great frame of mind. Yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need this. What do you like? I've got this because, somebody else is tying it up needlessly.
Yeah. For example, my backyard, we happen to live just outside city limits for our city, but so we have county dispatch. So at any given point, I could be traveling in different parts in my city, okay, or in the rough area, and I can travel literally from my city outside city limits back into city limits. So there's different points where there's streets that are covered by county and streets that are covered by PD. And so it's very odd in that sense. And we sometimes will get it very often just even driving through the neighborhood where our call will go to county first, even if we need PD based on something we saw. So it really depends, like if you're mobile, for example. So be prepared for that, and that could happen. Is a great comment. Whoever posted that, I couldn't see it on my side, but knowing what that is and being prepared, and don't let it get you flustered. I think that's important to kind of say, okay, yes, you have to kind of redo that. And there's times too where, even like I said, there's something that might be in county jurisdiction and they still send city because they're still the closest response. So again, the severity of what you're telling them, the dispatcher, is important, because they're going to know whether, okay, yes, it's urgent, or it's life-threatening, or we got to get somebody over there. There's something in progress. There's an active threat. There's somebody on scene actively burglarizing, etc. Those are the areas I think that matter, is understanding what the detail you need to give them is, so that they can interpret that. The faster you get them aids in the right response at the fastest possible scenario for what they're able to do in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And they do oftentimes, like, I mean, where we are in central Ohio, but the interesting thing is that oftentimes there are two state highways that kind of run, a state highway and interstate around where we live. And they will pull, I mean, at any given time, city police, county sheriffs. Now in our local village, the county sheriffs actually cover and contract with the village for police. So, you could get a different county, you could get a different sheriff, you could get the highway patrol coming off of, the state highway. So there's all sorts of people that, and depending on the sense of urgency and what is truly going on and what's happening, that really kind of makes it, to them, that gives them the information to say, okay, is this an all hands type thing where it's an active threat and we need to just pull everybody and have everybody respond? Or, do we have a little bit of time? And they have to make that decision. But here's the thing too, with that, never lie, never embellish, tell the truth, be direct, and tell what you need. But you don't want to get your church or yourself in a habit of being that, 911 wolf caller, that the church that called wolf, because that information gets recorded, and those dispatchers do that 24/7. So trust me, they know when an entity is calling and calls regularly or calls repeatedly, and when it's a community organization or community location like a church, they're paying more attention to that. So the information pops up on the screen, their CAD screen, and it tells them how many times 911 has been called previously to that location. They can go back in most cases and look at that information. So you don't want to abuse it. You want to make sure that you give them correct information to stress the sense of urgency, but at the same time, understand and realize that, they're keeping track of that. And so you don't want to get on their bad side to say, this church is calling again. Wow. Well, last time we really didn't have an emergency and they said we had an emergency. So case in point, real quick. And I know I've probably used this story before in previous episodes, but I was responding to my church one evening because we had a break-in, and there was one of our tech guys was there. He was talking to the person that had broke in. It was a special needs gentleman, and our tech person called me, and he's like, I'm not really at a place where I can call 911 to call the police to tell them, but this isn't like, I need some help. So I'm like, okay. So I head over there. As I'm driving over, now I'm probably I think I was like 7 or 8 minutes from the church, but I call 911, and I didn't call the non-emergency number. I directly called 911 because that was an emergency. they answer. I immediately said, I need to speak with someone to have an officer dispatched to my location. They said, okay, hang on. Then they transfer me. Then the police dispatcher comes on for Columbus, and she says, Columbus police, what's your emergency? And I said, hi, my name is this. I'm responding at the moment to my church building at this address. I need an officer to meet me because someone broke into the building and is being combative with an individual in the building. That's it. And the dispatcher was like, okay, thank you. We have an officer responding right now. Can you tell me what, and this threw me off, but she said, can you tell me what color vehicle you are driving? And I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. But I didn't think to tell them because I was driving and I was trying to get there in a hurry. But I said, I have a white pickup truck and I'll be parked on the west side of the building at entrance E, and I will do my best to meet you guys there. And the woman was like, okay, thank you very much. We've got officers responding. Can I call you back on this number if we need more info? And I said, absolutely. And I hung up, and that was it. And you know what? Because of our relationship with Columbus Police and the church and supporting that community, we had officers, because they said this is an urgent thing. We had officers from the next precinct over responding in droves to come help us, like coming out of the woodwork, because people we didn't even know, but they knew our church and they knew that we never call with that sense of urgency. So, and you think about that from, we're in a 40-mile radius of Central Ohio. There's over 700 churches, but they knew our church. And the officers told me when they got there, they're like, yeah, we know that you guys did an Easter egg hunt last year, and, and you're great in the community and you support law enforcement. So we were trying to get here to help you as quick as possible. But here's the thing. If you're out in the community and you are, you're calling and you have longer time, or maybe you don't have a full-time public safety person responding, that's still something that they're going to remember and they're going to know, about that.
Yep. It's there's so much that's important there. I mean, telling the truth, of course, hopefully everybody's doing so from a church perspective, is thinking about it from that perspective. And I understand being on 911, as we mentioned, you could have that brain fog, instantly freeze and then think, but being prepared to provide that extra information is important, exactly what they need. And they'll likely walk you through. They may not have you hang up. They may not end the call right there. They may actually provide you step-by-step instructions depending on the nature of the emergency. So they may give you play-by-play. They may give you additional details on how to work with a medical incident. They may want to know more details. I mean, I think that's a big number of times that I've dialed 911 is often from the vehicle, something I've seen and reporting on it. So they often want play-by-play and seeing, all right, where's the vehicle now, or what's going with this, or what's that. And it's funny. I kind of think back when you mentioned about how they keep track of every call. Not that I ever embellish, but I sat there and said, gee, I wonder how many times my phone's come up as dialing 911. Because I mean, I do it all the time. Like I've stopped. I don't even count anymore how often I've done it, because I just observe something, and if it's looks like it's going to cause a problem, then I'll call it in, and not have any concern about doing so. I'd rather get them there, and somebody had a comment here as well. It's better to have them start rolling and call them off if it's not as emergent as you might think, than it is to not get them rolling at all. And I think that's important back to the church safety world, is really thinking about it from that perspective of saying you want to really make sure that you get them rolling, because you're really kind of one of those two people that are out there, the ones that over dial 911 for every little thing, and it really is not important. So it's not just not giving them the accurate information, but just not using 911 appropriately. Dial the non-emergency line. Make sure every person of your team has the non-emergency line in their phone. in case they have to call and report something that isn't emergent. That still often goes to dispatch, but they're not going, if they're all tied up, they're not going to take that call as quickly as they would something 911. So think about that as far as your prioritization of that phone call. Is this urgent enough that 911, just because it's easy to remember and easy to dial, doesn't mean that that necessarily is the path to go. On that note, dialing 911, I don't know, anecdotal, most of us that are on here probably grew up with rotary phones, but that is why 911 is 911. It was chosen because it's easy to remember, and it was able to be dialed on the old rotary phones relatively quickly in its time. So just a funny point about it, I figured I'd throw in there tonight.
I remember back in the day when you had 3 numbers for, fire, ambulance, or police, and all 3 numbers were written down by the phone, and they were 7 digits, and you had to dial whichever one you wanted because they weren't connected at all.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. And the aspect of, and here's the other thing too, if you call the non-emergency number and you say, here's what's going on, I'm not really sure, and obviously be honest with people, but with the dispatcher. But if you're like, hey, I don't really know if this is urgent or not, but I don't feel comfortable with this situation because of this, like, this is why this is happening. They can upgrade it. They can say, okay, well, we appreciate it. So you call them back if something changes, a status changes, and obviously they help the officers prioritize based on what they have going on. But there are certain times too where, for example, there was a Wednesday night a couple of years ago when we noticed somebody was setting up a camp on our property. And as soon as I pulled in and I saw it, now I'm not comfortable necessarily going up to it by myself, because I didn't know if somebody was living in there or what they were doing, or if they were still in their tent, like they had pitched a tent on the edge of our property. So I called the non-emergency number and I told them who I was, and I said, when you get a chance, could you please send an officer by, because I'd like to go see if we need to trespass this person, but I'd like the officer with me because I don't want to go do this by myself. And so the woman, the dispatcher, was like, yeah, absolutely, we'll send an officer, and call us back and let us know if that status changes. Call us back on 911. And I said, okay. And you know what? It was probably about 10 minutes later, a police car pulled in. And so again, having that relationship was the precursor to that. But they know, that our local precinct knew at the time that we don't typically call unless it's a concern, not necessarily even urgent, but just, we're just not certain about, we're just not sure about this. So we would feel better if, you had an officer swing by. And, I've had situations where an officer was, doing paperwork or eating dinner out in the parking lot, and something's going on the other side of the parking lot that they can't see. And I'll walk out to them and say, hey, could you go check out this vehicle on the other side, because they're doing something crazy, or this doesn't make sense. And they're like, sure, no problem. And they'll run over and do that. So it's not, I guess, I don't know. Again, I go back to like what you said in the beginning. It seems like something that's like, well, gosh, duh, you should know. It's not that hard. But what's funny is I've been in several situations with my pastor where, he'll hand me his phone and he'll say, hey, go call 911. And I'm like trying to get my phone out, and he'll hand me his phone and he's like, here, like, the passcode, just use my phone. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like dialing, and I'm like, wait a second, you could dial 911. And he's like, well, I could, but you know what to say better than I know what to say to them. And so, we usually kind of chuckle and joke about that, but there is a lot of truth to it. That, I mean, obviously practicing it, you kind of get it down a little bit better and work through some of that. But having that information at your fingertips and And hopefully this again, we touch on this topic about once every couple of years. Hopefully this is been a good and helpful reminder for you all, that, you know, it's easier when you practice and kind of think through stuff.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, as far as practice, obviously, you're not going to just call 911 and practice. There's actually kind of a process for this. They actually call them test calls. So it is possible to contact the non-emergency number, work with your dispatch center and so forth, and confirm that says, okay, is the right information even coming up when I dial? So let's say you're calling from a landline from your church building, for example. Most of us probably not. We're probably using our cell phone, but it's worth checking that as well, because some people may use that phone if you have one. But checking that. But you can coordinate with your dispatch to really kind of set up and schedule a test call so that they know it's not an actual real call, that you're going to be testing at this time, that it's not a fake, it's not somebody playing hoax or trying to do this. You can coordinate that. So it's important to really do that. And then with your team, honestly, schedule this as part of your training, like your quarterly, your monthly training. One of those topics you can set up with your team is actually walking through like fake 911 calls, not actually dialing, but just pretending. Use that practice and saying, okay, put down different scenarios and different details on a sheet of paper and hand them all out. And then go around the room and have each person have to dial 911 with the information you gave them on their slip. And it's a great chance for them to just talk through that, and then kind of post-mortem it after each one. What went good, what didn't go good, and use things like we said here tonight to kind of correct that. And it's just ways like, oh yeah, I didn't even realize, because we all can make those mistakes in the heat of the moment, certainly under the pressure and so forth of calling 911, even in a fake kind of practice scenario. There's just all the eyes are on you, all that pressure, and you're like, okay, what did I miss? Did I do it right? Did I do it this way? So test calls are important. Look into that. You can actually Google that and look at kind of your non-emergency number and look at what you can do. They may have to schedule it at a less emergent time or a less frequent call and look at their staffing, but that's important. One other point I wanted to make before we kind of round out here is somebody may ask about texting 911. And so while that is certainly important, some areas and increasingly across the U.S. have the capabilities of receiving text messages to those call centers. Your best bet is still always to dial 911. You don't want to try a text and hope it went through. If you have something that's important enough for 911, you're best off going to phone. Now, obviously, you can't jump on a phone. You're hiding, you're concealed, whatever. There's somebody in the church after hours. That's a different story. Maybe texting makes sense. Dialing 911 and saying nothing, leaving the phone open is important. Don't do a 911 hang up either. Calling 911 and hanging up when you're trying to be quiet is going to result in them calling you back. And if your phone is going to ring
out.
Exactly. Well, but I mean, that's important. I mean, if you're truly under duress in some way, dialing 911 with no answer at least gets a response if you can't speak. So just be aware of that while text is possible, and certainly while we're accustomed to texts and apps and all sorts of things, just go back to plain old fashioned 911.
Well, and to your point, I know in Ohio, in central Ohio, they've been rolling out the text to 911. And as they make it better and better and better, that changes. And they've said that, like, you always have the option to text, but the crazy thing is they can't always see where, like, when you send a text, they can't always immediately see where that call's coming from and pinpoint it. So to some degree, you could be, you could be creating a situation that's harder for yourself to get help because it's taking more time because that system hasn't really been perfected yet, if that makes sense. The other piece of that too is oftentimes they will ask, like, if you have someone, if it's a medical situation, you have someone go unresponsive and you need an ambulance or something like that, they're going to give medical care advice over the phone. But oftentimes they will ask continuing questions like, does that person appear to have a drug overdose? Has this happened? Has that happened? Because they're trying to get more information to advise the responding units. For example, to that, if someone goes unresponsive and they think that is a drug related incident, they will dispatch an officer while they're trying to get the ambulance there, because most of the officers, or a lot of the officers with Columbus PD, actually have Narcan now. So, if they know that, then they'll send other resources, or they'll talk you through it. So it's important to make sure that you're getting the best care and the best information, and handling that in the best way, really.
Yep.
So
that's key. It's important. I mean, there's multiple ways you can put together practice and training around this. And you can start it out the same way we did the broadcast, really, is in the sense that it may seem like a dumb moment, but there's things you can do to practice with your team, and it's important to do so.
Absolutely. And, next time you do radio practice, like Mike said earlier, that's a great thing to extend that and bring in, hey, let's go through 911 calling. How do we handle that? What would you say? And you know what? There's plenty of opportunity. If you don't understand or know the 911 system in your area, talk to one of your local police dispatchers or police officers, because they would be happy to tell you how it works, and you having a better knowledge of it helps the process. But oftentimes local departments will do tours and show people how the system works. So that could be a fun road trip for your team. Take your team to the dispatch center so they can see and they know, okay, this is how this works, and this is the information we need. So,
yep. And I'd say one last thing is be sure to check out our episode on kind of working with law enforcement and first responders. We've had a couple of them that we've talked about it, but it's really important to get folks like the local agencies that support your church location to have a chance to have visited your building, know different things, have contacts outside of the 911 system, so that you actually have a history with the departments and agencies in a positive light, maybe proactively and not just reactively.
Develop that relational equity, as Jared so often puts it. I'll steal it for this broadcast. So yet again, but hey, anyway, thank you for hanging out with us. As always, you can visit us through our website or communicate through our website, which is churchsafetyguys.com. Again, tickets still available for the Church Security Essentials Conference, the end of this month in Austin. You don't want to miss that. Visit churchsafetyconference.com. And as always, if we can help you or your church or your ministry, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'd love to be a part of that and love to help where we can. So take care until next week. God bless. Hope you have a great week.
Bye now.
Thank you for joining the Church Safety Guys broadcast, brought to you by Vigilant Impact. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback and interaction. Be sure to share our broadcast with your teams, join the discussion online, and connect with us on social media or at our website at churchsafetyguys.com. For other great ministry resources, download the Church Security app. Remember, keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and semper disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.